Mr. American Girl is intended for adult audiences and may contain coarse language, adult themes, and chronically online brain rot. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, Jonathan here. Quick update before we get into the guts of today's episode. We are talking about the tariffs and how they can possibly affect American Girl moving forward. And this is an ever-evolving situation in the news. So, updates are happening pretty much daily at this point. This episode was recorded on May 9th. So this is before the update that the tariffs are going from 145% down to 30%, which just to the best of my knowledge, they were 20% before all of this stuff happened. And now we're only up 10% at this point, at least for the next 90 days. However, most of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today is still very relevant because the tariffs are obviously not completely gone. They're just on a 90-day reduction as of my recording this intro. So it is an ever-evolving situation, but like I said, there's just a lot of stuff that's relevant today, talking about not only the things that could potentially come of tariffs, but things that have already happened because of the threat of tariffs. And that includes things like the cancellation of certain lines in American Girl and people getting laid off. So this still already has a very big effect that's happening right now, and there's more that could happen later. But I just wanted to preface that this was recorded before the 90-day truce that we have as of right now. But again, all still very relevant information. So with that said, let's hop into the very first episode of Mr. American Girl. Welcome to the very first episode of the Mr. American Girl podcast, a podcast that I have been teasing for about a year now. Hi, my name is Jonathan, and I have been collecting American Girl and Pleasant Company items for the last 4 years. I was one of those people that just took a deep dive into the rabbit hole of years gone by starting to collect some things from my childhood when COVID hit about 5 years ago. And it sent me down a path that I never realized I would go down, but it has been so incredibly fulfilling, rewarding, all of the good feelings. And I have been making content on YouTube for a couple of years now, and many of you listening to this first episode might actually know who I am because I've been clowning around on YouTube, showing off my American Girl and Pleasant Company collection, and just talking all things American Girl. So I thought it would be fun to finally make it an official podcast and just see where this whole thing takes us. I have been so excited about this for so long, to the point where I kind of built it up in my head so much that I started to have like this anxiousness or anxiety about starting this podcast in the first place. And I just thought, you know what? Now's as good a time as any. It's a sunny spring day. I'm feeling good. And I got a bunch of really awesome doll mail in the mail a few days ago. And I just wanted to sit down and talk about American Girl because it is one of my most favorite things in the world. And I don't know exactly what the future holds for this podcast. I would love some suggestions. I love talking about news, rumors, and gossip for current American Girl items and upcoming American Girl releases. But I also really love talking about the Pleasant Company days, everything from 1986 to 1998. So we can talk books, catalogs, collections, dolls, anything you want to talk about. We'll just, like I said, we'll see where this journey takes us. But I think today would be a good day to talk about the future of American Girl, because there has been so much uncertainty and doubt in this current political climate. As we all know, probably if you're listening to this podcast, that American Girl is largely an American-based company. They don't do a whole lot of business outside the United States. And in a very tumultuous climate that we're living in right now, that brings up a lot of questions about the future of American Girl, their products, the company as a whole. And now that we have these looming tariffs on imports coming from China, which is where the vast majority, if not all, of American Girl's products are made, there's a big question mark about the future of American Girl. And many of us are questioning if this brand is even going to look like it does now, 3 years from now. We have all seen the many forms that American Girl has taken over the years. It launched in 1986 under the ownership and direction of Pleasant Rowland, who founded the company. It was her idea that she brought to life and turned into a multi-$100 million brand by the time she sold it to Mattel in 1998. And since since the sale of the company to Mattel, we have seen many changes over the years, some good, several bad ones that we will talk about in episodes to come, but we are used to American Girl changing at this point. We can almost expect every 5 years to have something major come along that kind of shakes up what we know American Girl to be. And now that American Girl is facing these gigantic tariffs that are being put on Chinese imports, that's going to raise questions about what American Girl does going forward. Are they going to be manufacturing in other countries to try and not pay as high of tariffs? Are they going to completely change the product line altogether? Or are American Girl dolls just going to start costing $250 as opposed to the average $125 that they cost now, which already seems quite high, even though they've done a really good job sort of keeping their prices down through, all of the inflation that's been happening since 1986 to now. They technically are cheaper than they ever have been if you account for inflation, but I think that might all be about to change. We have steadily seen prices increase, especially over the last few years. I believe when COVID hit, American Girl saw this huge resurgence in interest in their brand amongst millennials and Gen Z and Gen X, and I think that they did some of the best numbers that they had ever done in 2021, and I think a lot of that interest began to fade over the years, and now they're kind of left wondering where to go from here, because as we've seen, like a lot of the recent releases that they've been doing, they've been just re-releasing items that were designed and released in the 80s and early 90s with like the school outfits for Kirsten and Addie, and Samantha just got her birthday outfit re-released. So I know they know that older generations of people are buying dolls and accessories for themselves, and also many of them are buying these things for their children. But word on the street is numbers aren't what they were a few years ago, and we've kind of seen some things that they've done to try and combat that. Again, we saw a pretty decent price increase last year. Most of their dolls ended up going up in price like $10 or so, and we've been seeing them shut down retail stores all over the country, and I think we're in a very transitional period for American Girl. So it kind of seems like things might have been a little shaky even leading up to this year, but once the announcement of tariffs started happening, I can imagine things at Mattel were probably insane for a while. I mean, we've already seen the Create Your Own line basically disappear completely. And I think we learned a few things when we found that out, because I had always assumed that the Create Your Own dolls were assembled in America, but it turns out they are most likely, according to other people that I've heard from, they actually assemble them in Mexico, which I thought was really interesting because the doll hospital is located in America. So it's very interesting that they have multiple facilities for that. Now, to the best of my knowledge, just about all of the parts and accessories, and when I say parts, I mean like the doll heads and torsos and stuff, I believe that all of that stuff is made in China. And so if a doll is already like fully assembled and ready to go on store shelves, that is made in China and shipped over to the US for them to sell here. But the things that are made to order, like the Create Your Own dolls and dolls that are assembled from the American Girl Hospital, which I think they call the American Girl Care Center now, those are made in different facilities, and we've come to find out that the Create Your Own dolls were actually assembled in Mexico. So it seems like the parts were purchased in China and shipped to Mexico, and they were assembled there because those dolls are made to order. So every single time an order came in, presumably an employee would get the list of parts that were involved in making the doll, assemble them, and ship them to what I think was a distribution center in Texas. Maybe some of you can correct me if I have that information wrong, but the supply chain is quite deep with American Girl, as it turns out. They have parts made in China, and then they're redistributed, assembled there, and they take a long trip around the world to finally get to the end customer. And as you can imagine, every step of the way, that's another cost added. And it's honestly a miracle to me at this point that they are able to keep prices where they've had them all of these years. But obviously something is up, because they have completely pulled the plug on the Create Your Own line, and they aren't giving anybody information about what to expect with this line moving forward. Basically what they've been telling everyone is they are trying to basically like reimagine the Create Your Own line in a way that is still viable for customers. They didn't say specifically it's because of the tariffs, but Obviously, because of the timing of all of this, they've had to shut this down completely. And it's honestly kind of heartbreaking. As somebody like me who just loves to create your own dolls anyway, I actually have a few of them in my collection, despite mostly collecting vintage Pleasant Company. But we found that like they're just not making create your own dolls anymore, which means presumably a lot of people are out of jobs right now, which is horrible. And we've all seen that quote from Donald Trump saying, well, maybe kids will just get 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, as if like that's the actual problem with all of this, which is insane. I'm not getting into it today, but the fact that the administration enforcing all of these tariffs doesn't either don't understand what they're doing, or they do and they're just being coy about it basically and not caring about all of the fallout that's happening because of the tariffs. But clearly we've already seen people losing jobs, which, in my opinion, is the worst part of it. And also it's worth noting that a child going from 30 dolls to 2 dolls, if that was every child that was happening to, that is over a 90% decrease in revenue for those doll companies. So what do you think happens when a company loses 90% of their revenue? That doesn't just mean children are getting 2 dolls instead of 30. That means the doll company goes completely bankrupt. So effectively, children get 0 dolls instead of 30. And obviously, it's not just the doll industry that's being affected, but it's what we're talking about today. I understand that there are way worse things that are happening because of the tariffs, but it's not a really good sign for American Girl because, again, all of this stuff for the most part is being made in China, and we don't really know what's going to happen because, again, I guess most of you don't know what I did in my past life, or at least one of the things I did in my past life is I owned a party supply business with my partner for about 10 years, and that business is still going, even though I don't really actively participate in it anymore. But it was a thriving party supply business, especially before COVID, and we had to import certain items for our product line because they just aren't made in America. And without this being a huge lesson in tariffs, basically what happens is companies are forced to order supplies from China or other countries, but mainly China because of the way China's infrastructure is, because those products aren't available to be made in America. So for us, for instance, recyclable paper plates and paper cups and napkins, all of that stuff was not made in America. For us to have that as part of our product line where, I sit down at a computer and design all of this stuff from scratch and have it manufactured from raw materials, there is not a facility in the United States to do that at any cost. So for us to make those products, we had partners in China that we worked very closely with to design all the molds and the manufacturing, packaging, all of that stuff, so that when our products were manufactured, they were put in case packs, shipped over to America. And for our product line, I know, like, again, a lot of this has been in the news, and I think for big box stores, it seems like it's about 30 days for the turnaround on, like, basically shipping something from the port in China to the US. For our business in particular, it was closer to 6 to 8 weeks. So we're talking, as much as 2 months sometimes. And also keeping in mind, the development of products does not happen overnight. So, and I guess many people don't remember this either, but in Donald Trump's first presidency, he actually put tariffs on China the first time that he was in office. And it actually so gravely affected our business that we had to stop manufacturing tableware altogether. We lost an entire branch of our business that I spent about 3 years developing. And not only that, those tariffs were put into place when our products had just left the port. So we had paid our manufacturers all, like, obviously you pay for the item in full, and then it leaves the port, and then it gets to the US, and they give you a grace period, but again, because these people making these laws don't understand how they actually work, we ended up basically, there was like a grace period. I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around 2 weeks. It might have been up to a month, but it was a really short grace period. But we didn't have the opportunity to like what was I going to do? Like hop in a sailboat and go out and stop the boat and say, oh, never mind, we're going to ask for a refund from our manufacturers. So our product line that we launched, let me tell you, like, it was a ton of money that we lost on it, basically, because these products arrived and we were forced to pay tariffs on them. We didn't have a choice. It was either that or dump them in the ocean. So it took us years to make our money back on that product line. And we ultimately had to scrap it because tariffs put such a heavy burden on the cost of the production of that product line that we couldn't make it anymore. We just had to stop it. And it was devastating for us the first time. And it is even worse this time around, obviously, because we're hearing more about it in the news. But when we're seeing companies like American Girl completely cutting off branches of their business because of these tariffs, that is ringing the alarm bells for people that have been in industries like this before. Because what starts happening is there's this huge snowball effect when all of a sudden you don't have revenue coming in from Create Your Own Dolls. You have an entire payroll of employees that are either put on standby or fired altogether. These people are out of work now. And on top of that, American Girl, I would imagine, is probably on roughly a year-long cycle with the design and production of their products. I think that's another thing that people tend to forget is products, like I said, you don't just imagine it and it's in your warehouse the next day. These things are developed by teams of people that, again, are on payroll. These are real-life people that show up at a 9 to 5 every day and pour their heart and soul into designing products for American Girl. You know, anytime that you see new, just recently we had new releases for the historical girls. So new outfits for Mary Ellen, Melody, and Nanea. Those didn't just jump out of somebody's brain onto a store shelf. That was teams of people sketching, tossing ideas back and forth, doing the research and development to make sure that these things are historically accurate. There are months and months of hours that go into developing these products, typically, within teams of people. It's not just one person sitting at a desk doing this. And all of these things are set in motion, often as much as a year or two in development ahead of time. And this is why all of a sudden having these tariffs thrown in their faces with little to no warning. Again, I would say most of the stuff that American Girl is releasing right now, this stuff would have been being designed and developed before the election even happened. So the absolute chaos that's coming from all of this, I think, has probably got American Girl in a tailspin. I know that we're expecting new Truly Me dolls to be released, or at least new outfits and a handful of new dolls. Rumor has it that that's been delayed because of the tariffs. I don't know that that's actually true. But as you can imagine, as these teams of people are setting up new systems to deliver products to people and developing new ideas and costing products, they don't know where to go from here. Because if you're having to source a specific product from China, which again, American Girl, most of their stuff is coming from China, they're in a predicament now because they don't know what they're going to be able to sell at this point. Because if they have to double their prices, then all of a sudden some of the things that they're selling for $100 right now, they're probably questioning whether or not somebody's going to pay $200 or more for that item, especially considering that American Girl dolls are a luxury item. They're not the only 18-inch dolls that are being offered in the USA, but certainly as far as Playline goes, they are by far the most expensive dolls that you can buy. So if we're staring down the barrel of a recession, I think that American Girl is going to suffer greatly because of that. Because again, it is a luxury item, and not only is it a luxury item, it is a luxury kids item. So I would venture to say they could be some of the first things to go when people are really trying to make tough decisions about items that they are and are not going to buy. That doesn't mean that their business will go away completely, because anytime when there's a recession or depression or bad times happening, we always need things to bring us comfort and joy during those moments. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that people could be buying more of these things to bring themselves joy during the sad times. But that's going to be a lot harder to do when you're broke and trying to figure out how you're going to manage medical bills and grocery bills and rent or a mortgage. And you're going to have to see how much money is left over at the end of the day to buy luxuries. And again, when things are bad, people start prepping for the future. You have to put money aside. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens and what comes of all of this, because not only is the economy looking really bad, luxury items like American Girl are likely going to be chopped from households all over the country. And in addition to that, American Girl really is an American brand. I know that they have some niche markets in other countries, namely Canada. I think that there are a good handful of Canadians that collect American Girl as adults, but the vast majority of American Girl's business is in the USA. So they don't even really have a diversified demographic as far as what country their product is sold in. If the economy in America sucks, that's the economy that they get. They don't really have an opportunity to sell to any other countries. So I do think we can expect fewer releases, at least while the threat of tariffs is happening. I don't think we're going to see as many things. I would assume that they're going to try and work with the inventory they have. I think they're probably not going to be stocking as many things because, again, you pay the tariff on the item once it arrives to the country. And for those of you that haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to this, because I know there was a lot of misinformation put out by the Trump administration about who pays the tariffs, but just to be absolutely clear, it is the company that is importing the item that pays the tariffs. Again, this is from firsthand experience. When you purchase something from overseas, from a country that has tariffs placed on it, once that item arrives to the port, you have to pay that tariff or you will not get your items. So basically what ends up happening is the cost of that either gets eaten by the company or in most cases, it gets folded into the product cost. And in American Girl's case, maybe there's a chance they have some extra profit margin that they can maybe eat some of the profit loss that they're going to have based on these tariffs. And maybe instead of just doubling the price of their dolls and accessories and everything, maybe it'll be a 25 to 50% increase. But at the end of the day, they can't just do nothing. Because American Girl is owned by Mattel, we know that corporate decisions are made in the interest of shareholders and the people at the top of the company. And oftentimes there's a stark contrast in who benefits from which decisions are made. So again, as far as I'm concerned, and all of the things that I've been seeing that Mattel has been doing over the last several years, especially coming to find out that they fired Bill Greening from their Barbie team, I think they've kind of proven that they will stop at nothing to make sure that the head honchos at Mattel are making as much money as they possibly can. So it is not outside of the realm of possibility that we are going to see some major restructuring happening at the American Girl brand, which can mean a lot of really scary things, because this is when you get people coming in and trying to make decisions about what they think is going to be the best sellers and maybe not what creates the best product. And I think that that's again, when you talk about stark contrast, I always make the point that Pleasant Rowland, the founder of Pleasant Company and American Girl, always put quality over profit. Every single time. The reason that the Pleasant Company era of American Girl is so highly regarded is because of the quality and care that went into the products. And many times that meant spending more on the production of a product in, doing nicer materials and having more details and more pieces in them and almost no plastic. All of those decisions meant less profit in Pleasant Rowland's pocket. Now, don't get me wrong, she cashed out and made, in today's money, probably over $1 billion when she sold the company to Mattel 12 years later. And I'm sure she was making good money while she was running the company. But just based on the decisions I've seen Pleasant Rowland make versus Mattel as a company that owns American Girl, you see very, very big differences in the priorities of the people making executive decisions. Like I said, I would have trusted Pleasant Rowland to weather this storm a lot more gracefully than Mattel will. I imagine we are going to see, like I said, some price increases, but I think we might not have seen the last of the discontinuations of certain lines in American Girl. I would not be surprised if we started seeing fewer historical releases and then possibly just starting to see some of the historical characters retired. We have seen time and time again, especially under Mattel's ownership, that, and I say this like cautiously because I do think American Girl does try and make good decisions. At least, the team that are actually dreaming up these ideas and executing them, I think that they try really hard to have a very diverse product line with a lot of representation. So this is not like a critique of the team that makes this stuff happen, but you do see decisions get made from time to time. I think particularly with the Girl of the Year line, I do know that not every single doll that they've made is Caucasian, but they do seem to favor Caucasian and light-skinned dolls when it comes to the Girl of the Year line. And I think that those decisions are based, again, this is just me assuming the worst in people, but I think a lot of them think, okay, well, because we see most of our customer base as being white, then we should make white dolls to accommodate to that. And I just don't agree with that philosophy. I think that's a really terrible take in how to develop a product line, because American Girl from the very beginning was meant to be an educational device for young girls. And again, I know that I was a young boy that was interested in the line, but the intent for Pleasant Company and American Girl was to educate young girls about history. So I think with the original spirit of Pleasant Company and American Girl, children were meant to have dolls that didn't have the same lived experiences as the child did. So that would not only mean different skin tone, but also different socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever. I get the value in having a doll that looks like you and a similar story, something to relate to, and, maybe something that you can tell your own stories through. But I think it's equally as important for children to have dolls that don't look like them or have the same socioeconomic status or have different abilities than they do. So again, I think as an educational device, I really hope that that's not lost on American Girl as, time rolls forward and things get more expensive. I always feel like that's what the corporate bigwigs are the first to cut, because again, we've seen a lot of issues with company, particularly Target. They're slashing DEI efforts. And, obviously that's a huge issue. I think everybody suffers when things like that happen. Thankfully, at least with the new releases we've seen from American Girl, as I mentioned in a video on my YouTube channel, I love that they are continuing to show focus and put attention on dolls of color as part of their historical line. So not every single historical story is told about, white people. So I don't see a ton of evidence that they are doing that stuff now, but it does worry me what decisions that Mattel corporate might make in terms of trying to make sure that they can sell every last unit as quickly as possible and as lazily as possible, I have to say, because in my personal opinion, I think children should have every different type of race of doll. So yeah, that's one of the things I worry about as far as some cutbacks we might start seeing, is I worry that we are going to see fewer dolls of color as an excuse of like, oh, well, we can't sell these as well. But like I said, I think that's a very lazy excuse, and I think it's unacceptable. But we'll wait to see if they actually do that. Again, I don't have any proof that they can or will do that, but it's just something that makes me a little bit nervous, knowing how Mattel has made some decisions, particularly with regards to the Girl of the Year line in previous years. But we'll see how that shakes out. But I do think gone are the days of the doll that's cheaper than $125. I know when they had those price increases last year, they were touting that the Truly Me line was still going to stay at $115, but based on the outfits that have been leaked and all of the pictures that I've seen, I cannot imagine that they are not going to do a price increase on those dolls, because thankfully they've made the outfits look a lot nicer. The ones that they had that they released in the last Truly Me revamp are pretty much ubiquitously hated. They are those t-shirt dresses with a pair of shoes and no socks. It's very, very bare bones. But now it looks like we're going to have multi-piece outfits with jackets, with zippers and socks. So that's a big cost increase. So I would not be surprised that these Truly Me dolls launch and they're going to be at least $125 now. That's my guess, is they're going to be $125. We shall see. But I think fans of American Girl are going to have to start getting ready to see price increases, especially, again, they've relaunched their rewards program, and thankfully pretty much all of the changes were good. I think they did a really good job changing their rewards program to further favor the customers. I know, as somebody who has spent a lot of money there over the last 12 months, they made some changes that benefited me. I started getting all of my rewards points right away because I had some that were basically banked up because I had already gotten the maximum amount of rewards for the year, but I think they removed that policy. So it looks like basically there's no limit on the rewards you get, and you get them right away. So even though I said I probably wasn't going to spend a whole lot more at American Girl any longer, That might change. Well, again, we'll see what happens with the prices, but just knowing that they did some things that are more favorable to the customer makes me curious if also they aren't going to raise the prices a little bit to compensate for that. Another thing that I think might be drastically affected by tariffs is we might actually start seeing fewer play sets, if I had to guess, because for the most part, shipping things from China, you're going to pay based on the volume of the shipment and not the actual weight of it as a general rule. So big bulky playsets might not be viable to ship anymore. And again, we might start seeing some things happen like DIY sets or something. Who knows? Like things that can pack really, really flat and small, and then you get it sort of like Legos. You have to spend like a day building it. Maybe that's an idea that they might try out, but we're definitely going to see some cost cutting measures. I just don't know exactly where, and maybe American Girl doesn't know exactly where either. But I have to say, if I was in charge there, I think the first thing I would be looking at is cutting down like the bulky products, because they would be quite expensive to ship. But like I said, the first thing that they cut was the create your own line, which I think is very sad. I think that's such a fun element to have. When they introduced that, people were so excited because it gave them the opportunity to make a doll that looked just like them, and they weren't limited by what was available, you know, as part of the Truly Me line. So according to American Girl, they are going to bring it back. I do think it's very telling that it was the first thing to go, because it's their product line that has the fastest turnaround that's imported. I obviously don't count the doll hospital or care center or whatever, because those things are assembled in America. But when you order a create your own doll and it's assembled in Mexico, typically the create your own dolls arrive in like 3 to 6 weeks from the date of order. So again, very, very quick turnaround compared to some of the things that they develop and have manufactured in mass in China and then shipped in on boats. Again, like I said, I think those things probably take about a year from the original idea to actually having the product landed in the warehouse. So the fact that the create your own line went away altogether is not a good sign, because it kind of feels like the canary in the coal mine. I am going to guess, especially if they can't just re-implement it the way they did before, I think we're going to see fewer options as far as what you're able to create with that line. So I would assume they might cut things by, you know, as much as half. So for instance, like instead of having 2 versions of brown eyes, there might only be 1 version of brown eyes. Likewise with skin color, instead of having 2 light, 2 medium, and 2 deep, we probably will just get 1 light skin tone, 1 medium skin tone, and 1 deep skin tone. And it's possible we might only have 1 or 2 outfits as an option to dress the doll in. I don't know for sure. These are just guesses. And like I said, if I were in charge, maybe some things that we would look at if we absolutely could not do everything we used to do. But rumor has it is they're looking for a supplier outside of China, which is kind of crazy to think. I don't know where in the world dolls are getting made like this, because to my knowledge, Germany's not making dolls like they used to. And if you're unfamiliar with how American Girl dolls used to be made, they actually used to be manufactured by a company called Götz that was a very prominent German doll manufacturer in the 1900s. I know that sounds more ancient than maybe it is, but I believe they were founded in the 1950s, and in the mid 80s when Pleasant Rowland was conceiving American Girl, that's the company that she went to license the dolls to reproduce as, you know, her vision for American Girl. But the original American Girl dolls that you see, their head sculpts and arms and legs and everything already existed as dolls that were being sold out of Germany by Götz. They were basically just remixed and turned into what we now know as American Girl dolls. But that's not an option anymore. And obviously one of the big things that Mattel did when they took over the company is they moved all production to China. Now, I do think that Pleasant Rowland had started to do that before she sold the company. I think that started to happen around Josefina's time, like in the late 90s. So that's not all Mattel's doing, but all of that's to say is I think it was becoming increasingly not viable for American Girl to be making their dolls in West Germany. That's my theory on why American Girl was only available to order directly from Pleasant Company in the catalog, is because I don't think they had the margins to sell those dolls wholesale. And I think that's why we saw an explosion of different things when Mattel took over. I mean, not only did they have Mattel money to back up all of this stuff, but they had severely decreased costs to make everything. So So like I said, I have no idea where Mattel is even going to look to have these dolls made. I guess they're probably in cahoots with their Barbie team right now. I do think Barbies are made in different countries. I think like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand are like the main other countries that they use. So there is a chance that Mattel is looking at those other countries. Now, I don't know what the tariff rate is on those countries, but I think there's tariffs on most countries right now. So there still will be an increased cost, but it's not crazy for American Girl to be doing that anyway. It's always important to diversify your manufacturing capabilities. So this might not ultimately be a bad thing for American Girl. It certainly is in the short term, but my guess is they're talking with their factories that make Barbie products in countries other than China to maybe figure out what they can do. So I'm going to guess that that's possibly what's going to happen with the Create Your Own line is that's my guess, is that they've put it on pause for now to see if they can get like heads, arms, and legs made in a country like Indonesia and have them shipped to Mexico and see if that's enough to make the Create Your Own line viable again. But I guarantee you that line is going to crop back up. I think the dolls were $235 at the time of the hiatus. They absolutely, in my opinion, will at least be $250, maybe as much as $275 or $300. But again, we will see a price increase when those come back. I cannot imagine they won't. I've kind of speculated for a while that Create Your Own dolls will probably end up at $250. So that's my guess, is that they probably will bring Create Your Own back, but it will be more expensive with less options. But to me, that's better than no Create Your Own line at all, because A, I personally love it, and B, there are a lot of children that really have loved the opportunity to make a doll look as close to their own appearance as possible. So I think it's really sad that that's not available right now. So those are my predictions on the future of American Girl in regards to the tariffs. It's a super scary time right now. I imagine the people that are working on the team at American Girl are probably at least a little bit freaked out, because when drastic things happen like this, people start losing their jobs. It's a really scary time to be in America right now. I think that's one good thing about having Mattel behind American Girl at this point, is they do have the money and resources to prop this brand up as long as they need to kind of weather this storm. Whereas if it was run by a much smaller company or just like a single person, American Girl might not survive this. So I'm at least grateful for Mattel at this point to have the resources to keep American Girl alive. And Lord knows American Girl is keeping me alive at this point. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I thought today was the day to finally sit down and make this thing happen. So be sure you're subscribed if you're not already. This podcast will be on all different platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. So wherever you listen, please subscribe. It will really help me out, and you'll actually be able to know when the next episode comes out. I'm going to try to do these regularly, at least once every other week, but you know, if it goes well, we'll try and do one a week. We'll see. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, I would absolutely love you forever if you left a nice review about the podcast. It's a new podcast, so every single review really counts. So I'd be super grateful for that. I have tons of videos on YouTube, so be sure to check me out at I Dream of Johnny on YouTube. That's JONNY. There are over 100 videos of American Girl spanning like 2.5 years, so it's enough to keep you busy. And if you still want more, you can support this podcast and my YouTube channel by checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/idreamofjohnny. There are hours and hours of exclusive videos there, and it's the best way that you can support my content so that I can continue doing this. And that's going to do it for today. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.